Welcome to the More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. I'm Kevin Kelton, and as always, I'm joined by DJ McGuire,
the founder of the neoconservative left, and I still don't know what that means, from Hampton Roads, Virginia.
Rebecca Kushmiter.
I am your jingle bell rocker coming to you from Kensington, Maryland.
And Joe Syard is back with us.
I'm the co-founder of the Working Fans podcast, political novice, sitting in for Greg Matuzak, who is providing music for the New Blue Sun Deluxe Edition. Greg, that's an inside joke for when you listen.
So it's great to have all of you here as we look again to the news of the week. And we'll start with, as we call it, Republicans behaving badly. I'm going to throw to you first, Rebecca. Moms for Liberty is kind of a pet topic of yours. I won't go to pet peeve. Yeah. And they were in the news this week by way of the husband of a Moms for Liberty president.
Oh, not just the husband. The Mom for Liberty was involved in this story, too.
Yes.
Bridget Ziegler, I believe is her last name, one of the co-founders of Moms for Liberty down there in Florida, who is married to Christian Ziegler, who is the chair of the Florida Republican Party, were involved in a three-way consensual affair with an unnamed woman for some period of time. We don't know the details. We don't want to. Bridget, Christian, don't tell us. We don't want to hear. But apparently Christian decided that the next thing to do to move their relationship along was to assault the unnamed woman and secretly record it. And now he is under investigation for that crime. The Moms for Liberty National Twitter account initially defended her, then stopped defending her, and then started blocking everyone who said mean things about her, including yours truly. So blocked by Moms for Liberty. I've been blocked by Trump, blocked by Jerry Falwell Jr., Carrie Lake, and now Moms for Liberty.
Well, I like to think that they were actually promoting my book, Things We Shouldn't Do, because one of the three novellas is about polyamory. So I like to think that they read the book and they were basing their lives off of my novel. Right, Joe?
I don't think reading books is their thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think that they would read my book. That's the last book they would read. DJ, what do you have to say on this particular topic?
First, this is not how polyamory works. Let's make sure we have our constants down. It's Better Business Bureau, not bisexual book banners. I am saddened but not surprised that Mrs. Ziegler has taken more of a fall for being bisexual than Mr. Ziegler has for being an alleged rapist. That says a lot about the movement that we're dealing with here. What we are finding is that the culture wars are basically a moral car wash for these people. They get to behave as they see it badly when no one is watching. But to make up for it, they get to act like complete lunatics on culture war stuff. They are so dedicated to the shtick that they can't even step back when the husband is now alleged not only to have raped this woman, but secretly recorded their sessions, which itself is a form of sexual assault.
Well, revenge porn is a crime. It's, if he were to post it somewhere, that's right. Yeah. And so far, we aren't aware that he has done that, but
no, we aren't. But there are some states where even if you don't post it, it is a crime.
Right. And he could be using it as blackmail material. Also highly immoral. Yeah. Joe, it looked like you had a comment.
Yeah, there was one article that I saw that said he had posted it to a Google Drive, which to me was weird because it's like the video, that's one thing, but then to post it to a Google Drive for what reason?
So you don't have to save it on your phone. So your kids can't unlock your phone and find it.
Not having kids, I don't even think about that. I just went right to like devious means, whether it's him leaking it out himself or putting it in a place that it can be discoverable and having it get out, further ruining that person's reputation.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Like Joe, what you just said about people wanting him to step down, I can't believe that's even a question. Like, come on, the guy he's up on charges of sexual assault. He's
it did take them a year and a half to get rid of George Santos, so.
Yeah, that was a fun day.
And they're about to renominate Donald Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, right.
And speaking of assholes who happen to be Republicans, Ryan Fournier, the founder of Students for Trump, also had his issues with domestic violence this week.
I'm dying to hear Rebecca's comments on this.
This guy, his whole claim to fame is Students for Trump. That was his thing. He formed this like grassroots student organization, Students for Trump, and takes a lot of credit for Trump's 2016 victory. He has, risen in stature since then. He's got some other group now that he's part of. So this is all he has ever done in his life, is be for Trump. And this week or maybe 2 weeks ago, he was arrested after his girlfriend called the cops in tears, allegedly, because she was hiding upstairs because he had become violent, including hitting her in the face with a gun. And I believe it was the great philosopher DJ McGuire who said, nothing says penile inferiority like pistol whipping someone.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, moving on to international issues. The ceasefire ended. Israel is back on the warpath, so to speak. So Israeli public opinion is apparently turning against Bibi Netanyahu, which is no surprise to me. The question is, how long can he stay in power? Now, he is a wartime president now, and he is executing the war against Hamas. But that said, DJ, does this military mission have to end before the Israelis can look to have some kind of an election? Because he's not going to resign. So are they stuck with him for the duration, or can they walk and chew gum at the same time politically, so to speak?
No one is in a parliamentary system. No one is ever firmly in power. That's the major difference between a parliamentary system and a presidential system, where if you are elected, they can't get rid of you except through rather unusual means like impeachment. In a parliamentary system, all that really needs to happen is one party in his coalition say, I don't think it's a good idea to keep this going anymore. Let's talk to the other guy. And it's over. Now, the assumption is that most of the political parties in Netanyahu's coalition are actually to his right, so they probably won't do that, and that's true. But one of them, which is Shas, which is one of the parties that represent a group of Orthodox Jews in Israel, they're actually to Netanyahu's left. And it wouldn't surprise me if they started talking to Benny Gantz, talking to Yair Lapid, and saying, maybe we can work together and get beyond Bibi, because Shas has worked with the left before in its history. Shas is not a right-wing only party. Religious parties in Israel don't behave like religious factions here in the United States, or at least not like the religious right does here. I don't think Netanyahu is going to last much longer after hostilities cease. The question is, one, when will hostilities cease? I would prefer that's not until Hamas is removed from Gaza. And then the question will become, what will the Israeli government look like after that?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. So I think we all are familiar or heard Chuck Schumer's speech on anti-Semitism this week. I found it very moving myself. And I wonder whether it's going to move the needle in this country, because frankly, I see this as something really, really dangerous, not only for Israel, but for the United States and for Jews around the world.
I think the trend of anti-Semitism is concerning now and will continue to be concerning, perhaps more so. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu is to some degree culpable, because we had this breather, this moment where there were no bombs falling in Gaza this week, and there were the hostage exchanges as it was extended, and it looked like there was maybe a path out of the worst of the violence. And then Israel immediately started up again, and we're seeing families, children dying in Gaza again. And honestly, I don't know what Israel is accomplishing with the indiscriminate, or what appears to be indiscriminate, bombing at this point. I don't see the Hamas infrastructure being dismantled. I am not reading headlines, Hamas dude captured in great victory for anti-Hamas forces. All I'm seeing is bombs falling on places where people once lived. And unless that changes public opinion about Israel, and by unfortunate extension, public opinion about Jewish people, is not going to improve.
Go ahead.
Just from reading his speech and the point he was making about standing up against anti-Semitism, seeing it in like the rallies over here, how there's been just such a fight between the two, and the rise of anti-Semitic attacks have increased. And it's gotten even to the point where I have a friend that I was told a secondhand story about, that they had started making anti-Semitic jokes and then coming back on it as if they didn't mean it. I have never known this person to be like that before. So what kind of media are they taking in that's feeding that? And that's what's making me nervous about this, that it's going to pick up, and that somehow it's passively just going to be allowed to continue. And then words become thoughts, become actions. And it's, to me, it's just a slippery slope. So
yeah, no, you make a really good point. And then there's, sort of the flip side. There's a very strong pro-Palestinian movement that is not anti-Israel and is not anti-Semitic necessarily. It's just people who are saying, listen, we're at a crossroads. Can we pay attention to the plight of these people who have been, living in this no man's land of nationality for decades? Can this be the opportunity to think of a future for them? But we are so mired in the present of what the hostilities look like that we can't think of a future for them. And the Friedman article that we'll get to, and other articles that I've been seeing coming across my feed today, are all about, we got to make a plan for Gaza, we got to make a plan for Palestine, we've got to think about a two-state solution. But Israel is not moving towards that. Hamas certainly isn't moving towards it. And I just can't see the path.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about the Thomas Friedman New York Times column. I know that everybody has some thoughts on that. Just to build on what you were saying, Rebecca, I think, of course, everybody realizes that some solution that acknowledges the existence of the Palestinians and their right to have some territory has to happen. We can call that a two-state solution. It may end up being a multi-state solution. Nobody yet knows the parameters of that. I think when people say, and I know that you meant this in the right way, but when people say the Israelis have not yet started to think about that, I think their position is, we are. To get to a two-state solution, you've got to acknowledge that one of the states has to be Israel. And you cannot acknowledge that when the other side of the table does not acknowledge Israel's right to exist. So they are trying to get to a two-state solution by getting rid of the political group that is an impediment to the two-state solution, getting rid of the political group that will do everything to stop a two-state solution. So again, I've been a hardliner on this show. I know a lot of people disagree with my politics, and I respect that. But I'm of the opinion you have to get rid of Hamas to make any progress in Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank. You can't multitask that. They have to be removed from the playing field. And until the Palestinians can come up with some governing body that represents them in a positive manner, that wants to find a two-state solution, their lot is not going to get better. And with that, I throw it open to you, DJ, whether you want to talk about the Friedman article or you want to respond to something that one of us said.
I'll get to the Friedman article. I have a lot to say. But first, I want to discuss one thing about Schumer's speech. Schumer aimed most of that speech at the left, because that's what he was most concerned about, because I think that's what was most surprising to him. He's used to seeing anti-Semitism on the right. He's used to having to fight it on the right. He's not used to it popping up on the left. And I think for a lot of us who are not on the left, who are either center right, or right, anytime we're going to hear intersectionality, anytime we're going to hear this privilege or that privilege or the other privilege, we're just going to look at them and say, well, why were the Jews accepted? What blind spot do you have regarding them? Now, as for what's happening in Gaza today, from what I've seen, it was actually Hamas that busted up the ceasefire. I don't think the Israeli government, the current Israeli government, is interested in a two-state solution. I do think most Israelis are, though. I think most Israelis understand that this is not going to work with a permanent occupation of Gaza and the West Bank.
The Friedman piece that we haven't yet entirely talked about, that was my problem with that piece. It was moving figures around a map, like a Bond villain. It didn't talk about the actual groups of human beings who have to live through and after this.
Why don't we take a moment just to set up what this article was about? Thomas Friedman, who of course is a columnist for the New York Times and writes extensively on international affairs, including the Israel-Palestinian issue, wrote a piece which was basically saying that the Israeli government is going down the wrong path, and he would like to see them adopt what he called two teams that would review government policy, independent teams. And he just called them the red team and the blue team. And one would try to be critical of the government policy and show the pitfalls, and the other one would take a counterpoint. And all of these opinions would be made public, and then there could be a vigorous public debate about what the best path going forward is. Did I sum that up correctly, do you think?
You did. I would say that Friedman could have saved us all a lot of bandwidth by condensing that entire column into just 5 words. And those 5 words would have been, Henry Kissinger is my daddy. That could have been the whole column. Because it was a sickening paean to the kind of inhumane realism that Kissinger was famous for and defended until the day he died. And that those of us who are his critics continually castigated him for.
So, DJ, what would you like to see happen in terms of finding some solution to this big mess?
There should be a dozen Gazans forming a committee on public safety. We should all know who they are. There should be a spokesman talking every day about how horrible Hamas is, about what Israel is doing. And if they want to criticize Israel for the manner in which they're knocking Hamas out of the box, go ahead and do that. Israelis are doing that already. We knew who Afghan rebels were. We knew who they were. We knew who we would talk to. We'd say, okay, these are the folks who will help us build a new Iraq or a new Afghanistan. None of that has happened in Gaza, and that is negligence that borders on the criminal.
Well, and that is because, DJ, there is no we in your we. We, America, the West, are not in Gaza. We don't know who the dissidents are because we're not in there. We don't recognize Hamas, so we don't have any diplomatic relations with them. Also, I think there are no dissidents who are willing to talk because they're all afraid they're going to get killed.
That's what I was going to say. You just, and frankly, you saved everybody because I was going to say that in about 7 minutes, and you said in a sentence.
And
Right.
that's not wrong, but
when you talk about Iraq, you talk about Afghanistan, we were in those places prior to hostilities, during and after. We had eyes on the ground.
I think you both make terrific points.
And we're frankly, pretty, too.
And you, well, you are.
Well, she is.
But DJ and Joe have great beards, and I'm jealous of them. But in terms of whether we had eyes on the ground in Gaza, I don't know the answer to that. But I do think that there is a distinct difference between Afghanistan, Iraq, and Gaza, which, Rebecca, you kind of stated. There may not be that dissident or group of dissidents because if they were to speak up, they would be assassinated by Hamas. So again, I go back to we cannot make progress until Hamas is degraded or removed so that people who disagree with Hamas can feel free to step forward and speak up.
I have no argument with that at all.
But here's the thing. Those people may not exist in Gaza. Not because there aren't good Palestinians. I'm not saying that. But we have this democracy where we've got the Democrats in the Senate and the Republicans in the Senate and the Democrats in the House and the Republicans and 50 governors, and they're all leaders in some form or fashion. But I don't think that exists in Gaza. You've got Hamas, and then you've got a couple of organizations like the Ministry of Health, which is just an arm of Hamas. They're not free to speak out against Hamas. So,
right. And so, so if you want to create an anti-government or encourage an anti-government dissident movement, a constructive one, you start by trying to figure out who are the most moderate religious leaders in the area. You know, who is a leader of a social entity that is more moderate than Hamas and is willing to, become a nucleus for one of these movements. But again, I just don't think that there is a way to get in and start finding people like that, surveying people like that, and we don't have prior relationships.
That may not exist, Rebecca. It just may not exist.
We may not. I mean, it may exist. It may be silent. It may be dormant because, there's, you got to think there is some imam, there is some priest at a parish
who's ready
church
to say, yes, Israel has the right to exist?
Maybe.
Okay.
But we don't know because we have not been talking to anybody there for 15 years.
My feeling is that whatever that answer is, it's going to have to be regional, and the other Arab states are going to have to be pulled into this. They can't just wash their hands of it the way they seem to want to and say, gee, we want to see a free Palestine in some form or fashion, but don't make us get involved. Don't make us establish it. I
wouldn't trust any of them anyway. As much as I don't trust Erdogan, let him do it. It might distract him from corrupting his country for a day and a half. And in theory at least, he is a democratic leader. Yes, you can laugh at it, but it's not like any of these Arab potentates who clearly don't want a democracy on the Mediterranean, because that would have a lot of their own people asking questions. Wait, why does Gaza get to vote for its leaders, but we don't?
Yeah,
those are not questions that Erdogan will necessarily have to deal with.
So my issue I had many issues with Thomas Friedman's article. And by the way, he's a brilliant man, and I generally admire him and am impressed by his writings. I was not this week, and that's okay, I hope. My issue with what Friedman wrote and what I've seen a lot of people writing is they take the position of Israel has to step away from this myopic military mentality and start thinking about the end game. They have to start thinking about what comes next in Gaza so that they're not occupying it for another 30 or 50 years. And my question is, what makes you think that they're not discussing this? These people are sophisticated, and they've got a Knesset. They've got a unity coalition government. Mm-hmm. They are discussing all of this. They are trying to figure it out. It is so arrogant for those of us on the outside to think that all they're doing is looking at where they can drop bombs next week. They're trying to figure it out. The problem is these are thorny issues. And again, I go back to they seem to have made a calculation that they cannot make progress on the political sphere until they cure the illness that is Hamas. Think of it this way. Someone goes to the hospital, their arteries are clogged. We can talk all day long about putting them on a diet, getting them on an exercise routine, getting better sleep. The first thing we have to do is get the crap out of their arteries so that their system can work. Now, that may be a very coarse metaphor, but that's what has to happen here. And I think that's where Israel is coming from. Everybody keeps saying you've got to limit civilian casualties. And of course, we all want that. Everybody is talking about, are they creating a new generation of radicalized Palestinians? And I'm going to defer to Lindsey Graham today, who took the words out of my mouth. They're already radicalized. I'm not saying there aren't good people that are Palestinian. Of course there are. Of course that they love their families. They love their God. They want the best for their people and for their land, but they have been radicalized since they were born. Everybody has already heard that in Palestinian schools, they teach math by saying, you've got 10 Jews, you kill 6 of them, how many are left? They all think that Hamas is working in their best interest. They all think that Israel is the devil. So it's not that the Israelis haven't thought about the end game, in my opinion. I believe they've thought about it and made the calculation that the only way to get to the end game is by eliminating Hamas. Hence, that's why the ground war has to continue. Moving on to other topics, there was a gentleman named Robert Kagan who wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post this week talking about the possibility of a second Trump administration. And he wasn't too fond of the idea. In fact, I'd say he called it an existential crisis for the country if Trump gets reelected. So, DJ, do you think that Mr. Kagan was being hyperbolic, or do you think he was underselling it? Where do you fall on this particular op-ed piece?
Now, the first thing to understand why this got my attention and why it should get all of our attention is that Robert Kagan is actually one of the foreign correspondents for the Washington Post. He's an opinion columnist about international affairs. And much of this has been dealing with how we should deal with the Chinese Communist Party and the Putin regime and everything else. So when he talks about the danger of a dictatorship in the United States, what he's basically saying is the killer is in the house. That's essentially what he's trying to get across. The phone call's coming from inside the house. My apologies to Scream fans. I'm off to a great start here. But he's basically trying to say these are the things that I've seen from afar and that are dangerous from afar, and they are not so afar anymore. They are here. And he goes chapter and verse into why Donald Trump will almost certainly get all of the support of the Republican Party in 2024, why there is a great risk of him winning in 2024, and why, if he does win, there is a near certainty that democracy as we know it in the United States will come to an end. Because he and the people around him now know how to use the machineries of government to concentrate more power on himself. The particular phrase I was looking for, and I just found it now. The Trump administration will be filled with people who will not need explicit instruction from Trump any more than Hitler's local Gaultiers needed instruction. In such circumstances, people, quote, work towards the Fuhrer, unquote, which is to say they anticipate his desires and seek favor through acts they think will make him happy, thereby enhancing their own influence and power in the process. That is what I was referring to.
But, I was thinking about this today, and I can't predict the future. I did not think that Donald Trump was going to win in 2016. I thought he had maybe a 5% chance, and yet I was wrong there. But this is not 2016, and Donald Trump was an interesting experiment for a lot of people who ended up voting for him, or for a lot of people who just stayed home or didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I know he has a committed, loyal, they would fight probably to the death for him following. But I think when push comes to shove, when September rolls around and Donald Trump is in everybody's face every day for 60 straight days, they're going to go, oh, no. I do not want to go back to that. That was like a bad romantic relationship. I did it once. There were some thrills, but I got out of it and I ain't going back. And I could be wrong. I'm just the cockeyed optimist in me just thinks the American people, and I understand that there's the popular vote and then there's the swing states, and anything can happen in Pennsylvania or in Michigan. But I just can't believe that they're going to hand the reins of power back to this psychotic sociopath. Now, if I'm wrong, well, then let's get on orbits and figure out where we're flying off to. But I just don't think it's going to come to that.
I'm not going to say you're wrong, Kevin, because I don't necessarily think you are. But there are certain things that the Democrats have to do, and I think they'll figure it out. I'm not sure they figured it out yet. The biggest thing that helps Donald Trump is that no one in America wants to remember the year 2020. And I think that helps Trump a great deal because 2020 was when Donald Trump was shown at his most incompetent and at his worst. But it was also the COVID year. And for most Americans, they don't want to remember COVID. They don't want to remember being sick. They don't want to remember losing somebody. They don't want to remember everything shut down. I think the overwhelming majority of Americans have sort of blocked the memory of 2020 from their minds. And that distorts the memory of Donald Trump's administration. If you stopped looking at Donald Trump's administration in December 2019, it was a dumpster fire of entertaining headlines, but there was not yet a lot of damage done to the country. It was in 2020 when all of that horror came to fruition, and we realized, unlike Mussolini, he can't even get the trains to run on time. But the American people have to be reminded of what 2020 was. They have to face that memory again, and they're not going to do it on their own. The Biden campaign and the Democratic Party has to remind the American people, look, this is what he was like in his last year in power, the year you don't want to remember. And we get why you don't want to remember it, but we have to remind you, this is who he was. This is what he did. This is how he made what you suffered infinitely worse. Do you really want that again?
We need to bring back all the Sarah Cooper clips where she would, act out his sound bites, like the one about, spraying stuff into the body to kill COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And like, let's bring all that back and just remember every time he got in front of a microphone for all of 2020, he sounded like a goddamn idiot.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Not like us.
No, we're smart kids.
Last topic of the week. Hobby Lobby seems to want to cancel Hanukkah, or should I say abort Hanukkah, because they're so anti-abortion. But they have decided not to sell Hanukkah-related merchandise in at least 2 states. What is behind this decision other than the fact that they're radical religious extremists?
No, that's it. You just explained it. Radical religious extreme.
I mean, I read the article and they're claiming, at least because I believe it was even in West Warwick, which is the store close to me in Rhode Island. They were claiming that they didn't sell well and a neighboring store carried similar items, or like some store in their family carried similar items, so they didn't need to. But I found that to be a very shallow explanation because even when I worked in retail, we didn't carry many Hanukkah items, but we carried something. Even if it was just a little banner with the Star of David on it, we carried something to represent. So for them to not carry it, it seems like a cheap cop-out.
It's totally a cheap cop. But at the same time, are you going to go to the kosher market in your town to buy a ham for Christmas?
Yeah, I'm not sure that analogy is a good one, but
okay. Let's say George Soros started a chain of kosher grocery stores. The size and scope of Hobby Lobby, and he said, "I'm a Jewish person. These are stores that reflect my values, and we're just not going to sell a ham for Easter to anybody because that's not who we are." Hobby Lobby is privately owned, right? It's not a publicly traded company.
That's correct.
So I don't have to shop there.
This is another example of the Overton window on anti-Semitism being stretched too far wide. Hobby Lobby thinks they get away with this because they're looking at everything around and they're saying, you know what? We can drop this and we can probably ride it out. And that's the problem.
Okay, well, let's not give them more of a plug than they deserve on our show. But we do want to end actually with throwing to Joe, because you do have something actually positive to tell us about.
Yes, and I'll make a long story short about this, but if for any of our Connecticut listeners, there is a charity running right now, Hip Hop for the Homeless. They do it for 3 or 4 weekends in December, and they stop at like 9 or 10 different stops. Every place that they stop and they do a show, all the proceeds from that show go to the homeless shelter or food pantry in that town. And Kevin, if it's all right, I will post the link for anybody that wants to donate. And I can also post the link that I did with the founder of Hip Hop for the Homeless. He's a teacher of the year in the Hartford area. And he goes into all the reasons that he created it and kind of like the reasoning behind it. So you can hear from the horse's mouth what it's all about. It's a great cause. Next weekend, they're doing a show in Norwich, Connecticut, and part of the proceeds of that show are going to go to benefit my hometown of Jewett City. So I just wanted to give a quick plug, and I'll include those links in the Open Fire group for anybody to check out. And I think it's important because this past weekend, there were reports of the homeless shootings in Los Angeles and Las Vegas. And even though that's not like a huge epidemic that's out there, caring for the homeless community is, and it's just nice what they do around the holidays. So I wanted to shout them out.
Yeah, it sounds like a really great program. I like the sound of it.
Me too. So with that, we want to thank everybody for listening. If you like what we do here, please share our link on your Facebook timelines so your friends can discover us as well. And with that, let me ask, who here has done all of their Christmas shopping?
Oh my God, Kevin! I'm having a panic attack.
We actually got my mom her present this week out of necessity since both her washer and dryer went out. So
a washer dryer for Christmas. I guess that's a pretty good gift.
One of the best Christmas gifts I got was a couple years ago. We got a combination toaster oven, air fryer, toaster thingy, and it was great because my kids could learn to use it. So when my teenage son needs chicken nuggets at 2 a.m, he can get up and make them himself.
I think I would get along great with Charlie. I really do.
Oh my God. I mean, if you like to eat as much as he does, you two would.
I probably like to eat as much. However, I'm sure my body shows it quite differently than his does.
He is 6'1".
Yeah.
He plays football and now he's taken up lacrosse. So he's never sitting still.
But you got 2 shots at a scholarship.
Sure. I'm going to tell him to keep working hard at AP Gov.
Yeah.
That's a better shot.
Yes.